Hello. I just have to hope this is working. Welcome. Buenas noches. Good to be here. I'm Eben Alexander. I wrote a book, The Proof of Heaven, and a follow-up book to that called The Map of Heaven. And they're really all about a near-death experience that I had back in 2008. And this is something that occurred after I'd spent several decades as a neurosurgeon. I thought I understood how brain, mind, and consciousness work. And then I was driven deep into coma November of 2008. And in fact, I was extraordinarily compromised by gram-negative bacterial meningitis that drove me deep into coma. And as people who've read the book will realize, it has everything to do with understanding the nature of brain, mind, and consciousness, and especially the damage to my neocortex. In looking back on it all over the months and years after my coma, I came to realize that it was a tremendous miracle to have any experience at all. And this is based on my long-term study of brain, mind, and consciousness, that it was such a gift to have this meningitis. Now, those who've read the book will realize I also had to glean details of what was going on around me during that week that I was gone from this world. And that's a lot of the backstory, was my family being there for me 24/7, holding my hand and all of that to try and bring me back to this world. But my doctors knew full well from the beginning that this was a tremendous challenge, and I was deathly ill. I went into coma within 3.5 hours, and when you have a diagnosis of gram-negative bacterial meningitis, that basically had me presenting to the emergency room with about a 10% chance of survival. It only got worse during that week. By the end of the week, I was down to a 2% chance of survival with no chance of recovery. And that's when I started coming back to this world. And when I did, I had no memories of the life of Eben Alexander before coma. In fact, I had no words, no language, no memories at all of what it was to be a human being on planet Earth. Every bit of that was deleted. All I knew when I came back to this world was the extraordinary journey I had been on. And then it was over the next hours, weeks, and months that I had recovery of all of my language, all of my personal memories. In fact, all of my memories from those decades spent in academic neurosurgery came back to me, and always conflicting with the fact that I had had this beautiful experience. Now, what is it that I remember when I came back to this world? Well, deep in my coma, it had all started with what I call the earthworm's eye view, a very primitive, coarse, unresponsive realm that seemed to go on for eons. The good news is I was rescued from that by a slowly spinning melody and white light, a very clear white light that came with a perfect musical melody. And it opened up like a rip in the fabric of that ugly earthworm eye view all around me, and ushered me up into this brilliant gateway valley, as I refer to it in my writings. That gateway valley was a very heavenly and beautiful realm, but it had a lot of earth-like features. I was present there as a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing, and we were looping and swirling with millions of other butterflies, all above this lovely valley that had thousands of souls down in it. As I described them in my early writings, they were dressed in simple peasant garb, but lots of joy and merriment. And I remember children playing and dogs jumping and all kinds of festivities. And it was in the setting of a beautiful world that had absolutely no death and decay at all. It was very fertile and lush, plant life everywhere, everything growing. These butterflies, as I would swoop down into that lush greenery, I can remember blossoms on trees and buds and flowers all opening up these rich textures all around me, and these waterfalls and the sparkling blue pools, just an absolutely magnificent setting. And it was all festive because up above it was being fueled by these swooping orbs, these golden orbs of light leaving sparkling golden trails against a blue-black velvety sky. And these orbs I called in my writings in the months after my coma angelic choirs, and they provided these chants and anthems, hymns that were just thundering through me. Now, the best part about this Gateway Valley and this ultra-real setting that I was living in is that I wasn't alone. There was a beautiful girl beside me on the butterfly wing, and she proved crucial to my understanding any of this as I came back from the journey. But she provided, in the midst of that incredible scenery, she provided this beautiful comfort and joy and reassurance because of the messages that came to me from her presence. She never said a word. She didn't have to. Her messages came to me very directly, telepathically presented into my awareness. And of course, as I said, I had no words or language. But when I wrote it all up weeks later and trying to record this whole experience, what I put down is that her message to me is, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You will be taken care of. And all of that was very much the truth. And I cannot tell you how reassuring it was. And that was just the beginning of this extraordinary journey, because I remember seeing there all of four-dimensional space and time of the material realm collapsing down. And then all of what I call deep time, that higher causality of that realm, of the Gateway Valley collapsing down, and deep time and causality, and then ascending through higher and higher levels, all the way out to what I call the core, to this infinite inky blackness that filled to overflowing with the love of the divine and the power of that divine in loving us and in providing the pathway and the journey of unfolding that we are all on. And it turns out in that core realm, I was aware of that infinite loving presence, of that divinity, that God, that deity. And of course, when I came back from it all, I was so absolutely shocked and astonished by the power of that deity that, to me, the word God did not even remotely do justice to it. So in my early writings, as I was recovering from this illness and try and make sense of this incredible, ultra-real spiritual journey, I called that deity Om, because that was the sound that I heard when I was in that core realm. And so Om was the best way I could label that divinity when I was writing it all up in the weeks after my coma. And of course, over a period of time, I came to realize that Om deity was God, or Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh. I don't care what words you use, the words get in the way. The words pretend that we can debate, about our belief and what we accept as real about that deity based on experience. But what became very clear to me, especially when I did finally start reviewing near-death literature many months later, was realizing that deity is absolutely real, as we have come to realize, and does not depend on our religious dogma for its definition. And that, of course, is a big part of the problem, is our religious dogma falsely sets us as separate and falsely pretends that we are against each other in this whole journey of discovery, whereas, in fact, the deepest message from the prophets all the way along has always been that message of oneness, and that we are indeed in this together. This is all a journey that we share, and it is not a journey of separation at all. And this was a crucial part of my understanding, and it's a crucial part of the message that I bring back to the world in Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven, is to realize that this is not about separatism at all. I came to realize that the deep mystical traditions of all the great faiths, whether you're talking about Christian mystics, Jewish mystics or Kabbalists, Sufis, Islamic mystics, Buddhists, Hindus, what have you, the deepest core of the mystical tradition of all the great faiths comes together as one. And it is only in the teachings of various religious systems to the masses, where they've gotten well away from the mystical traditions, that we run into the false dogma of separation. And this is such a crucial part of understanding this. I think before we open it up to questions, it's important to point out that in Proof of Heaven and Map of Heaven, this is really all about understanding the deep nature of consciousness itself. And I come at this question as a scientist. I realize that our materialist science is absolutely nowhere in trying to explain the deep mystery of consciousness. In fact, there's nothing in our current science that has anything to do with understanding the nature of consciousness. And it's crucial for people to get that, to understand it at its fundamental level. Because what this is telling us, this deep mystery of consciousness, the fact that we cannot possibly come up with a way to explain how the physical brain might give rise to consciousness, is part of the underlying solution. And that is that consciousness is not created by the brain at all, that our consciousness is fundamental. And it is what creates all of the rest of this unfolding reality. And this is where I think it's important to point out that the brain, and when the brain and body come to an end, that is not the end of the soul. In fact, I would say our conscious awareness is greatly enhanced when we're freed up from the shackles of the physical brain. I think this is kind of a starting point for some great discussion on this. I would say that the whole tradition in Mexico, and that population that has a celebration of the Day of the Dead, the day of the loss of the innocence of the children, of the adults who have passed over, is a recognition that our souls are eternal. And this is very much right in line with the message of Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven, is that very much they tell us the story of how brain does not create consciousness at all. Our life is far more than just simply birth to death and nothing more in these physical incarnations. And that is where I would join in the Mexican celebration of the Day of the Dead. This is all about a much richer understanding of the nature of who we are and what our existence is all about. So with that, what I would like to do is open it up to questions, which I hope I will be seeing on our chat board. Well, the question comes in, who was that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing? Well, I'm not going to spoil the beautiful story by telling you that at all, because that is something that is explained in great detail in the book Proof of Heaven. And especially given kind of the overall flow of this interview, I'm not about to launch into that, because that's an extensive story. And those who really want to find out the identity of the girl and why she was so important in my understanding the reality of my journey and the nature of it, that is something that I tell fully as one goes through the book Proof of Heaven. I see a question, why do you think people have a different experience or perception of the afterlife? I think that's a beautiful question, in fact, because I had never read the near-death experience literature before. I'd seen occasional stories. I paid no attention to them because as a practicing neurosurgeon, I knew the brain creates consciousness, and I assumed that those hallucinations that occur when people are dying have no relevance to anything. Of course, I now know that that was completely wrong, and my older son, Eben IV, was majoring in neuroscience in college when I went into coma, and he was the one who very wisely advised me, if you want this story to mean anything to anybody, you need to write down everything you can remember about it before you read anything about near-death experiences. And that's exactly what I did. When I dove into that literature on near-death experiences, what I discovered is that stories from all continents, all cultures, going back thousands of years, have far more similarities than differences. You need to realize that, of course, we use our personal language to tell these stories. and our language is based on earthly experience. So, of course, the words that we use and the phrases sound a lot like earthly experiences, but in fact, what I came to see is the extraordinary spiritual nature of these journeys as something that cannot be very well expressed in earthly language comes through in thousands and thousands of these stories, going all the way back 2,400 years to the story recounted by Plato of the Armenian soldier killed in battle. And so, in fact, he had a life review. He realized that the only thing that matters is the love that you have shared in your incarnation in this world. And if you want any kind of successful journey in the afterlife, it depends on how much love you've handed out here. So in fact, the similarities of these stories far outweigh the differences. And so I would say that when you open your mind and realize that these stories all have those similarities, it all begins to fall together and make much more sense. I see another question here. When someone is born, is the soul from a previous life or is a new soul generated? Well, what I would say is that reincarnation is part of the fabric of all this. That to me, from my journey, seeing the eternity of souls also necessitates realizing that our souls come back again and again in this process of ascendance. And our souls are never in isolation. They are doing this with our soul mates and soul group. And the soul group is very broad. It can include, people you meet in a Starbucks line. It can include a homeless person that you just encounter once and have a brief encounter with. These soul groups are very large, and it's all about learning and teaching the lessons as we ascend towards oneness with the divine. So I do not believe that new souls are generated, but our souls come back again and again to get this right. I'm seeing another question. If so, Earth is experiencing an overpopulation of people, are more souls generated every year? How do you believe that works? Well, it kind of reminds me of that old question of counting the angels on the head of a pin. For one thing, this is not just about Earth. It is not just about humans. It is about all souls, and souls include many animals, especially higher animals, absolutely included in that. It also includes other planetary systems and civilizations far beyond our current knowing. So there's no way to kind of reduce this to the math of counting how many souls are here and trying to replace each soul with a new one. There's unlimited soul involvement in all of this. And that, I think, is an important way of seeing how this works. But again, it's getting away from our focus on humans and on planet Earth and realizing this is far greater than that. But even also realizing, as I said, that animals can have a very rich presence in the afterlife. I think part of that myth of thinking that it's just humans involved gets back to that idea of humans being the only beings that are conscious. Some people fooled into believing that, as I was before my coma, because of the voice in our head and thinking that the voice and this kind of rational mind, the linguistic brain, is somehow important in having a soul that participates in the afterlife. That is false. If anything, the linguistic brain gets in the way and is a problem. Our linguistic brain is very tightly tied with notions of ego and the false boundaries of self that are so misleading, although they are part of this whole material realm and this experience that we have in these incarnations is believing that we belong to the self that is this body. But in fact, we are, each and every one of us, far greater than that and not limited by this birth to death incarnation. This is one of the reasons why I'm such a big proponent of meditation and centering prayer, because this is how all souls can come to know this. You don't have to die or almost die to know this and to know everything I know about it. You can come to know that through centering prayer and deep meditation. This is why I do the work with sacred acoustics. For those who are interested and want to learn more about deep meditative practice, they can learn it at sacredacoustics.com. And there are a lot of practical guides on that website, plus some of the differential sounds that I use to return to my journey, to go deep into those realms, not just to recover memories from that journey, but in fact to revisit those guides and deities, the souls that have served as my guides, including the soul of my birth sister and of my adopted father. These are all things that we can, each and every one of us, encounter through deep meditation. And that's why I think it's important for people to get into meditation in forms of centering prayer, because you can come to know long before the day when you leave your physical body once and for all, that we are all eternal spiritual beings, and come to know that in very clear terms through a practice of meditation. But it's not something that just comes with 5 or 10 tries and then you say, well, this isn't for me. I try to meditate an hour or 2 or maybe 3 a day. I've been doing that for more than 5 years now. I plan on doing it for the rest of my life and then some, because in fact we come back again and again to get this right. And the things that we learn in many ways serve us in other incarnations, especially as our higher souls evolve. Let's see, I think there may be, in our tradition, we believe, this is a question I'm reading, we believe the soul can travel back and forth from this world to the next. Would you agree on this? I think that in many ways is true. I mean, I have had plenty of evidence in my life and in my meditations and my prayer that the souls of departed loved ones are very present for me. They often give me guidance. And that I would say they often do that even unbidden, if we don't even believe in this. I've had people come up and tell me that they were shocked by the reality of some after-death communication from a departed loved one. And that is something that is made very clear to us. So I agree fully. We just need to be open to that. And that's one reason that I love this tradition in Mexico about every year around November 1st, October 31st and into November 2nd, acknowledging that we have this relationship with the souls of our departed loved ones. That's very real. Then I see a question, does the energy of the soul influence a physical being? Well, I would say that that is every bit what is going on right now. For me, for example, my soul is influencing this physical being of me. I would say the big question for science, and what I have a major interest in as a scientist interested in consciousness and interested in these experiences and trying to understand it, is trying to understand how the soul does influence the physical being. I mean, I would say that all of our four-dimensional space-time unfolding reality for material beings is, at its essence, the influence of soul driving this whole kind of unfolding journey. But the big question from a scientific standpoint is, how does that happen? That has everything to do with that deep mystery of the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. And there's a beautiful book out there for those who are interested called The Soul Hypothesis by Baker and Getz. And those who would like that reference, you go to my website, Eben Alexander, that's EBEN Alexander.com, and look on the recommended reading list to see more. But there's a beautiful book there edited by Baker and Getz called The Soul Hypothesis. I'm now seeing a question, why do you believe young people are more afraid of dying than older people? I'm not so sure that's true, although it may be. I think it has a lot more to do with understanding the nature of our journey and realizing that death is not the end. And maybe some older folks have been around long enough and had enough experience that, and certainly if they've had a near-death experience, they've come to realize that there's nothing to be afraid of in dying, that it's not the end of the soul, and that our communications with our other souls continues after the death of the physical body. I, in fact, would love the opportunity to get this message more out to young people. I think that's absolutely crucial. I've run into people as young as 7 years old who've read Proof of Heaven, and they seem to find it very valuable. I think it helps one to shape out one's life, especially in how do we interpret the knowledge that comes to us through the world of science, philosophy, theology, and all of that. What are we to believe about the nature of reality and about our existence? And that is all something that I think Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven would help everyone, young and old, to come to a deeper understanding of. And then I have a question here. Why should we embrace death? Well, the reality is death is nothing to fear. Now, it turns out that homicide and suicide are absolutely forbidden by our highest spiritual selves, by all the rules of this existence, this soul creation, this understanding of this universe. There is absolutely no way to defend homicide and suicide in any setting. It's absolute anathema that people would use any kind of religious faith, a belief in this creative God, to support any kind of agenda of suicide or homicide. So there's nothing in any part of this package that says that we are here to kill ourselves or other people. However, that does not get away from the point that death is the end of the physical body, but not the end of our soul. So there's nothing to fear about death, but it completely flies in the face of all that we are here to do, all that this world has been created to do, to be killing others or killing ourselves. This life is a divine gift, and it is blasphemy to be killing ourselves or others. So in that sense, I hope that is crystal clear. And anyone who ever kills in the name of religion, as unfortunately we often see today, especially from some of the Islamic fundamentalists, I would say that that is absolutely forbidden by Allah, by God, by any deity that one believes to be true of the existence of the universe. And in fact, as I pointed out, that deity is one deity. And it's up to us to come to realize the absolute reality of that deity and come to understand that. But that is something, as I've said, we can do through meditation and centering prayer. And then I see here another question. You mentioned the Day of the Dead celebration. What kind of food would you like on your altar? Well, I'll tell you what, I love this, the fact that they often use sugar, and that is often what it's referred to. I, as a physician, realize that I probably eat a little more sugar than I should, because that's a general principle applied to something like sugar. Moderation is the key. But I would say I would have to leave that up to some of the people who are active participants in the Day of the Dead and have been for years to recommend to me what would be the ideal food that I would have on my altar. I am not one to buy too much into kind of materialist anything in terms of controlling or divining the way that we should come to know that world. But I think food is an important part of how we can perform that kind of celebration and worship and communion with the dead. And then I see a question here. Which culture embraces the belief of the soul the most? I'm not exactly sure which culture, although what I would say is that I believe that that those who realize that God is absolutely real, that we are eternal spiritual beings, that in fact our consciousness is very deeply connected one-to-one with that infinitely powerful God, and that in fact we are all here to serve as co-creators of the world that we want to bring into reality. And this is something we do through multiple incarnations. That is something that I think in very deepest mystical traditions of all the great faiths, they have a concept of the soul that really makes beautiful sense. Now I'm seeing another question. Do we get to meet with our loved ones again in heaven? Why didn't you see any of them in your journey, and other NDEs have seen them? I think important to point out, I often say that my journey, it's crucial to point out the distinction that my NDE involved my being amnesic for the life of Eben Alexander throughout the entire experience. In fact, even when I woke up, came back to this world, my brain was wrecked. It was devastated. And around the bedside in the ICU, my mother, my sisters, my sons, I had no idea who these beings were. And of course, that should indicate to you how devastated my brain was. I remembered where I had been, but it turns out that in the months after that, I came to realize that amnesia was absolutely essential. Because if, for example, as I've often said, if I had scripted this, my father would have been there front and center. He had passed over 4 years before my coma, and he was nowhere to be seen in my near-death experience. I came to realize in the months afterward, if he had been, in spite of the fact that I had a 1 in 10 million diagnosis, E. coli meningitis in adults is extremely rare, and a 1 in a billion recovery, because given a weakened coma with that severe gram-negative bacterial meningitis, most doctors agree there's no way I should be here on this earth alive at all. It should have left me, if anything, completely bedridden in a coma in a nursing home. The fact that it didn't is astonishing. So I often say that my NDE is the exception that proves the rule. It showed me very clear things about the nature of brain, mind, and consciousness, showed me very clearly the neocortex, which modern neuroscience says must be involved in anything explaining how brain is related to human consciousness. But my neocortex was so devastated, it was not involved in anything. And yet I had this rich conscious awareness that went far beyond what my awareness can do even now. And so I would say that that is an important part of understanding why my amnesia was necessary. If I had seen my father, I would have dismissed all of this, because I would have said, you see who you want to see as you're dying, and I would have dismissed it as a trick of the dying brain and forgot about it. That's why it's so important that, in fact, my guardian angel during this journey was the birth sister who I had no idea about. And those who have read Proof of Heaven will realize that why that is so important, and why that was the relative that I saw, but I had to be amnesic for the whole experience. I go into this in detail in Proof of Heaven and in the Map of Heaven, and it explains very clearly why I had to have this amnesia, to have that understanding unfold over the next many months and years after my coma. I see another question. What do you think about energy around us? Are souls without a physical being among us? I would say yes, that is every bit about what we call after-death communications. I was referring to that a few minutes ago when I was talking about how the souls of our departed loved ones are real. They are around us, and we must be open to that. Now, for the staunch materialist, like I was before my coma, I may not have been as open to the presence of my departed loved ones as I am now, but that's what it takes. And this energy is a very crucial thing to understand. It has everything to do with how we can get into healing. There's much more that we don't understand about healing that has everything to do with our soul being able to manifest perfect health. But we must realize that to get physical, mental, and emotional health, we must have spiritual health. That's where it all starts. And as healers, as doctors and nurses, physicians who are out there involved in healing, what I often tell them in my talks to these groups is that our own spiritual awareness has a tremendous amount to do with how we are able to heal ourselves and to heal others. And there's much that is coming to the world in knowing about energy and psychology and how different forms of energy can be used for healing. And I would say that that is all about how using, say, the differential sound frequencies of sacred acoustics, as I mentioned a little while ago, how they can be used to help all of us come into healing ourselves and healing others. So it's all about learning much more about that kind of energy and how we can use it. See another question. Some people believe that the body is our temple. How is that related to the soul? Well, I would say our body is very important. I've often referred to that in my own prayers, being grateful to God for this temple, the body that we live in. Remember, though, that this is not who we are. We do not identify completely and absolutely just with this incarnation, with this physical body, but in many ways it is the temple. And in many ways, it's also a repository of information. It's a part of an ongoing memory of what our what our life has been since we were born in this incarnation. And so in that sense, I would say the body is a very important thing to acknowledge as a temple. But don't take that to the extreme and believe that you completely identify with your body, and when your body and brain die, that's the end of you. That is not the case. But the body is very important. And again, this brings up a reason why it is fundamentally crucial to know it's an absolute thou shalt not murder. There is no room at all for homicide or suicide in any of our dealings at all in this world, and we should never violate that. I see another question. Would we ever have the technology to understand the afterlife or communicate to the other side? Well, what I do believe is that our knowing as modern humans, as humans in the year 2015 and the 21st century, trying to understand the nature of reality, there's plenty of room for us to expand our knowing of the relationship of brain, mind, and consciousness, and come to a much deeper knowing of the reality of our existence, of our spiritual existence, and of the much bigger purpose for all of humanity, all of life on Earth and beyond, all of civilization and consciousness throughout the universe. We can learn much more about that. And it has everything to do with expanding the boundaries of our science. But one thing that is coming to an end is our simplistic materialist science, the kind that I worship before my coma, the kind that says nothing exists but the physical, the kind that says, the science that says we are here birth to death and nothing more, the science that says brain creates consciousness. All of that materialist science is doomed. It's on the chopping block. It has everything to do with a deeper understanding of the nature of consciousness, and realizing that the hard problem of consciousness basically is an impossible problem for physicalists to solve through simply physical measures. The reality is we are deeply spiritual beings. All of this universe is a spiritual universe. The physical aspects of the universe are but the tiniest little fraction of it. That is the stage on which the drama unfolds. But it is a complete myth to think that that we will explain consciousness and all of our spiritual nature through the very simplistic truths of physicalist science. Our science will expand its boundaries much more to fully embrace the mystery of our existence, including our consciousness. And that means it has to move far beyond just the physical. Let's see, another question. We gather there is some kind of hell or not a very pleasant place as we move to heaven. Does this mean you think that people that commit crimes go there, or who ends up there? Very critical point. From my journey, I saw clearly there's no such place as an eternal hell. Now, that does not mean that we get off scot-free, because in fact, I would tell you, my journey showed me more clearly than just about anything that this universe is just, that we reap what we sow. If we are busy handing out pain and suffering to others in this life, we will have to pay the price for that. We will do that in the form of our life review. That old saying, your life flashes before your eyes. Like I said minutes ago, go back 2,400 years to the near-death experience of the Armenian soldier, reported by Plato. And he saw, wow, amazing, that you have a life review, your entire life flashes before your eyes, and not only that, but that the only thing that matters is the love that you have handed out in this incarnation. That is the crux of this question, because those who I would have thought before my coma might have been destined for hell, what they end up with is a life review where they have to witness every bit of the pain and suffering they've ever thought or handed out to others through their actions, and they have to experience it on behalf of their victims. And that includes every soul who was ever affected by their transgressions. So everyone who ever read about it in the news or what have you, every soul that thought about the horrible things that people do to other people, that soul has to be satisfied in the life review of the perpetrator. There's no need for a permanent hell when you realize the power of that life review and what it really means and what we have to go through. Let's see, another question. Do we need to believe to go to this beautiful place of heaven? Well, as I said, this is all about soul school and growth. We are all participating in the growth of all of humanity, all of consciousness throughout the universe, and we are all participants. There's nothing that will be beautiful about it if you have to go through that hellacious life review where you've been so busy handing out hell and suffering to others that you have to go through every bit of that. This is all about working our way towards oneness with the divine. That divine is pure love. And so the only actions that we take that move us in that direction are the actions of love. Now, God gives us the gift of free will. This is all about our co-creating this evolution of consciousness. And that free will enables that we can make choices that do not involve pure unconditional love. We can choose to do other things. We can be greedy. We can be selfish. We can give pain and suffering out to others. But those are choices that then we either need to make amends for in this life, or we have to go through that process in our life review of feeling the pain and suffering that we've handed out to others to adjust the course of our journey, learn the lesson, and then plan our next incarnation. But every bit of it involves going towards oneness with the divine that is pure love. So only those actions that involve our manifesting that pure love of the Creator for the creation enable us to move towards that. So when you talk about believing to go to this beautiful place of heaven, I would say that yes, in the long run, to achieve oneness with the divine, we have to, over these multiple incarnations, follow a pathway of manifesting unconditional love for ourselves and for all fellow beings. And that's what, in the end, gets us to that beautiful heaven. Then I see another question. Why do you think this happened to you, you in particular? I don't know. It's a beautiful question. I must say, people would often ask me early on in this journey, they'd say, so this beautiful, all-loving God, you think he gave you this meningitis and gave you this journey? Well, no, in point of fact, I believe I volunteered for it. I think that we all select what we encounter in our lives, and that includes the hardships. I believe that we do that with our soulmates before we even plan an incarnation. So we come in here knowing, as those higher souls, what we're in for. But that's part of the veiling mechanism. That's part of the necessity for forgetting so much of that when we come into these incarnations, so that this can serve as the stage on which that drama of learning and teaching unfolds. So that, in fact, I volunteered for this. I think it was part of my higher soul journeys and that of many souls that I've encountered in this lifetime who are partners in this effort, that all of us chose before this incarnation to join together to do this. There are many souls, hundreds of millions, if not billions of souls around this world that are part of this journey. But again, many of them play that role of the skeptic, some play the role of the disbeliever, some play the role of being the rapist or the murderer. It all has to do with things that we're here to learn and to teach each other as we grow. But I think important again to stress that this universe is nothing if not just. It is absolutely just. So do not expect that we get off scot-free from any of the things that we hand out to this world. And if we serve as conduits for love and compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy, then that is exactly what we will find in our spiritual journey being meted out to us. If we hand out pain and suffering, expect to run into that in full force, whether it's in trying to make amends for it in this incarnation or in your life review. Let's see, I have another question. To those who have a terminal illness and are scared to die, what is my message to them? Just to remember that you are an eternal spiritual being, deeply loved. We can find this in centering prayer, deep meditation. If you have a practice of centering prayer, deep meditation, do that. Apply that. That is exactly how we come to know these deep truths. We can come to realize this by these internal journeys. We can come to see it through dream work and dream states. But important to remember that message that was given to me by that beautiful angel on the butterfly wing. You are deeply loved and cherished forever. You will be taken care of. You have nothing to fear. This is a crucial message for those who are facing a terminal illness, who are approaching death. Realize, as so many do who have had near-death experiences, there is nothing to fear about death. It is, in fact, an awakening and a much grander conscious awareness than the very dim view that we have in this physical incarnation. This is much more dreamlike compared to the ultra reality of that journey beyond the physical body. There is nothing to fear about death. And then I see a question: what's the main difference between the two books? Between Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven, well, they really kind of spell out the journey as I go through it. And I promise you, this journey is still unfolding. I feel like I am just beginning this pathway of discovery, trying to understand the true nature of consciousness and of our spiritual essence. I would say Proof of Heaven is the book I would highly recommend that anyone start with, because that is the book that basically puts everything in perspective based on what I realized 3.5 years after I had come out of coma. And then the book, The Map of Heaven, how science, religion, and ordinary people are proving the afterlife, has a lot to do with my coming to realize this is about the awakening of all of humanity. This is not about some debate between science and religion. That is a very simplistic and false way to look at this. It's a much grander debate. This is actually a discussion that's been going on for tens of thousands of years among all humans, and has been in a very lively form for the last 2,000 years plus, as the discussion of what's known as the mind-body debate. And it's really all about the nature of consciousness, given that each and every one of us has never witnessed anything other than the inside of our own consciousness. As much as our brain mind is so good at convincing us that the out there is out there, I promise you, that has never been what anyone has experienced. We need to know much more about consciousness and what it really is. And that's what this is all about, is that discovery. Now let's see, if the other side is so beautiful and grand, why are we here suffering in this human flesh? What's our purpose? What do we need to learn? Again, we are here because this is soul school. This is where we're here to learn and teach these lessons of growth towards oneness with the divine. And remember that you don't go there to stay. That teaching from my religious upbringing is not something I believe any longer. Again, I believe reincarnation is a crucial part of understanding any of this. For the Christians out there, there are plenty of books about how Jesus taught reincarnation. It's perfectly consistent with the original Christianity. It's just that it didn't fit in with the Orthodox Christianity that has been packaged and presented to us from such as the Council of Nicaea, Irenaeus, and other church fathers. Remember that so much of the original Christianity is something that we really learned from looking at, say, the Gnostic Gospels. And I've learned a lot from the readings of Elaine Pagels. I do not claim to be a religious scholar, but I must say that much of what I've learned about original Christianity that comes out of the Gnostic Gospels and other sources shows me how crisply and vibrantly that kind of original teaching from the prophet, also teachings of Buddha, teachings of Muhammad, these all are much more pure in their original form, and so much of our current agenda and a lot of the conflict of our modern religion is due to the interpretations of dogma by other than the prophets. And I think it's gotten us into a lot of trouble. That's why I encourage people to go into meditative states and to go within. The answers lie within us all. That's the title of the appendix to the book, The Map of Heaven, where I go into how to use sacred acoustics meditations and all that for deep meditative practice. And that's what I would strongly argue. So Anyway, I hope that answers your question. I see another question here. How certain are we that we will see our loved ones again, our pets, our friends? Everybody wants to somehow be reassured. Again, I think that is something you can come to know through centering prayer and deep meditation. Do that now. Don't wait until you're on your deathbed, but get into that practice now. And I promise you that that kind of meditation and centering prayer will bring you great health. This is the best way to bring health, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health to us, to our loved ones, to all others, is through centering prayer. This is how we come to know this. But open your mind to this reality. Come to realize, and a lot of the guidance is right there in Proof of Heaven and the Map of Heaven, but come to realize that this is something that you can know from within your own journey through centering prayer and deep meditation. This is the way to come into the truth, and that is what I highly recommend that all of you pursue. Do you believe that regressions through hypnosis are healthy, helpful, and possible to go back to past lives? Well, I believe that there is a lot to that. I would strongly encourage people, if they're interested in that kind of thing, to seek out a therapist who is trained in doing past life regressions. You can reach out to us on the website if you have specific questions about that. But I think I think there's a lot of value to that if it's done with a trained professional. Of course, you have to use your own truth meter, your own kind of validation as to whether or not you believe that the information is being presented correctly for something that fits with what you've been through. But there are techniques to go within and find within ourselves some tremendous clues as to possible past life connections with other souls on this journey. This is something that I think can also be accomplished through deep meditation and centering prayer. But many people, especially those who are just getting started with such things, probably would be better off going through someone trained in past life regression. But I do believe that is something that can be very well addressed through an ongoing practice of deep meditation on a personal basis. I have another question. Could you tell us if you ever plan to go to Mexico during the Day of the Dead celebration and what you have learned to say in Spanish during this time? I would love to go to Mexico for the Day of the Dead celebration, and hopefully that is something that will happen sometime in the near future. I will say that my older son, Eben IV, is very fluent in Spanish. He has spent a lot of time in Mexico and in Colombia, in Peru, in Ecuador, and he loves going down there, and he's very fluent in Spanish, and I would love to be more fluent. Basically, I can say, hola, buenas noches, muchas gracias. I don't know how much else I have learned. I know a few other phrases, but I really want to learn the language and not just kind of pretend with a few pet phrases. But I love Spanish. I love the Spanish population. I've had given talks down there in Mexico and Puebla, given talks down in South America and several countries, and I find that the people in Latin America and in South America are just very open to these ideas, and in some ways more refreshingly than in my own American culture. Although I'm also very heartened by some of the awakening I see going on here in the United States. But I love my opportunities to come down and talk in Mexico and in South America, because I find the population to be so refreshing and open to the reality of my journey and the reality of our eternal spiritual nature. See, another question. There's a fine line between superstition and believing in the other side. Is there any connection? Many Hispanics do many practices to gain their way to the other side. Well, I think it's important to realize that we are eternal spiritual beings, that our spiritual existence is something that doesn't end in the physical realm in any sense. In fact, all of our notions of space and time, mass and energy are very much put together there to serve as the stage on which the drama unfolds. The other side is absolutely shockingly real. That is something we can all come to know. There are superstitions about things, but that, I believe, is where we're trying to draw the line, to realize that there's much to be said about the reality of our eternal spiritual beings and connectedness across the veil. But, you know, they can be separated from the false superstitious beliefs of people. And I guess we'd have to get into the very specifics to debate, you know, exactly how we separate out the differences there. Another question: is Mexico a country with an old karma? Because this is what we hear, a very spiritual country. I would say that's very much the case. I mean, that's what I have felt when I have visited in Mexico, when I've given talks down there, and also when I've met with people of Mexican descent in this country on my journeys. I feel they're very advanced. Now, the good news is when I go around to give talks in the United States, I found that many people in my country are also very spiritually advanced. They're not necessarily the ones who are out there, you know, reading the Scientific American in the front pages of the New York Times, where they think that, you know, there are some people who think that that is the source of the greatest, highest knowledge. But I will say that some of our sources, such as the New York Times and Scientific American and other you know, upstanding magazines, are not necessarily a great source of truth on this. You know, the truth about it is a much deeper and more profound truth than is out there for the armchair scientist philosopher who thinks they know what's going on about the nature of reality, might have even heard of the hard problem consciousness, might think they have something to offer up about the measurement problem and what it shows us about the enigma of quantum mechanics, but it's really in the depths of understanding about consciousness and quantum mechanics that we start to get into the real gist of reality. And that is not something that is well presented at all in Scientific American or the New York Times or similar publications. Were you afraid of dying before your NDE? Well, I would say before my NDE, I absolutely did not want to die because I thought death was the end. So I guess you could say that was being afraid of death. I was very much assured during my journey. I know now full well there's nothing to fear about death. Our eternal spiritual beings come away showing us a far grander existence that is part of our fundamental existence, all in part of reuniting with our higher souls and soul mates and soul group, all about planning that next incarnation. But don't forget, you have that step of the life review to go through. So make amends in this incarnation while you can for any of the pain or suffering you've handed out to anyone else. And also remember that the life review is an opportunity that you can actually do every day. My beautiful partner in all of this effort, Karen Newell, often says, just do the life review every day so that at the end of your life, you don't have something horrible to deal with. Well, it's been a real pleasure being with you, and thank you very much for your questions. I do look forward to visiting Mexico on the Day of the Dead, so hopefully we can work that out sometime. I would love to celebrate with all of you. Remember, there's nothing to fear about death. Remember that we're all here to manifest love, compassion, forgiveness, acceptance, and mercy for ourselves and for all others. So with that, I would like to say buenas noches. God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime. Thank you.